And so the program director called me and we spoke, and they looked at my CV and they said, we really don't have a course on international business, and your CV reads like it could be one. And so they said, can you create a course on international business? And I said, how does one create a course? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, think about it. And they wanted it to be taught by case studies. And so they asked me to sort of think about, and there are 15 weeks in a semester, so you need 15 sessions. And so I just drew an outline of, what would you have to, of all the steps that you would take if you were to start something, what is the first step you would take and how you would go, execute that. And which is really what I did towards the end of my career when I was setting up the Michelin plant in India. So it's, talking, understanding the market, talking to regulators, positioning your product in the market, setting up the supply chains, getting the talent, and then setting up the organization. And so I showed them that, and they said, that's fine. And they gave me a subscription to Harvard Business Publishing, which has a case library of cases from all over the world. And then I searched by keywords for all of these things that I mentioned, the marketing, the supply chain and all, and looked for cases that described scenarios that were very similar to the ones I had actually experienced. Because I felt that I had to put all of my biases into the course. That's the only way I could teach it. And so I was looking for cases, and obviously there wasn't any case on Michelin, but I'm looking for all the cases that would talk about things that I could relate to and then I could develop. Did that and took about 6 months to put that course together, and then taught it in the fall semester. I had one of my colleagues at Clemson sit in one of my classes to tell me if the way it was being taught was appropriate, because it's really difficult sometimes to get people to engage in a case discussion. And so that's what I started doing. And at universities, every class that you teach, the students are required to evaluate the class, and so you get feedback from students at the end of every semester on how well was, and there's a standard set of questions, and you get to see how your class was rated versus the classes in the department versus the classes in the university, so you know how it's positioned. Mm-hmm. And of course, if students have a lot of complaint, they come and tell you. So I teach the same course to two cohorts. One is a cohort of people who are taking an MBA entrepreneurship specialty program. That's a 12-month program. Mm-hmm. That's taught weekly. And then there is the same class taught to people taking the same course but who are working full-time. So they complete the curriculum over a period of 2 years, and they come in over 2 weekends. And we go through half the cases one weekend from Friday to Sunday, and the other half another weekend. And I've actually found it very enriching and very rewarding for a variety of reasons. Not so much what I have to say to them, but to hear how they perceive the way business is being conducted today. And I think the real learning for me is that, they're a lot younger than I am. And at some point, they're going to be in positions that's going to have an influence on my life. Yeah. And so I feel I better catch them before, so that they at least think of some of the things that we end up talking about when they're out and about making decisions.
That's interesting. And they say, like, when you teach something, you learn it better than you knew it before. Have you experienced that in terms of actual business knowledge rather than?
So what I found was, I used to read a lot when I was actively working. And I found that probably the best learning I got was from reading the case studies. Wow. Because I think the case studies, and sometimes you have the same author who writes a case study and who has also written an article in a management journal or something. But I think what they write as a case study is much more or much closer to what is really happening in business. Because when they write the article, they're trying to generalize it and sort of make it accessible to a much wider population, whereas the case study is much more specific. And so I found that I learned a lot more about the levers of business from reading the case studies. Okay. And then the other aspect is I've changed the course once, but every time I teach a case, even though I've taught the same case several times, I read it before I teach it. The day before, and I find another facet that I might have overlooked, or depending on how a question comes in the class discussion, you can discuss the same case in a variety of ways. And that sort of shows you that, because the value of a case study is there aren't any given answers. It's not like an answer at the back of the book. It's much more, under these circumstances, given these options, what did the protagonist in the case decide?
Oh.
And what would you have decided? Were you, playing the role of the protagonist? And if there are 10 students in the class, 10 people could have 10 different opinions. And the most important part is to get them to debate those, because there is no right answer. I mean, in business, there is no right answer until after you've implemented it, and then some time has gone by, and then you find out whether it was in fact something that should have been done the way it was done.
Mhm.
So I think it's very